Hello everyone, I'm Arne. I want to give a quick introduction to something that has been added to Zeek 8.0. It's the ZeroMQ cluster backend. As background, when you run a Zeek cluster, there are various processes involved. So on the one side, there's the worker processes. They process packets and create protocol logs. Then there is the manager, which is sort of a central control point in the Zeek cluster. There's logger processes, and then there's also proxy processes to offload computational tasks. I'm not going to go into too much detail how they interact. Just as one example is workers are sending their protocol logs to logger nodes. So workers do not write logs to disks themselves. Instead, they offload their task to the logger node, which then aggregates the logs and flushes them out. And to enable this offloading of logs, we need some communication library, and we are now terming that communication library or that layer cluster backend. So in Zeek 8.0, broker, you might have heard of broker as a cluster backend. Broker will stay the default cluster backend, but it's now possible to run a Zeek cluster using ZeroMQ as a cluster backend, so that inter-process communication between those processes is done with ZeroMQ instead of broker. With that, I would like to give a bit of historic background because the cluster communication in Zeek is nothing new. If you look all the way back to 95, that is when Bro was first created. And already in 2003, which is about here, it's when the first cluster. So in 2003, Bro was able to run as a cluster already. I'm not quite sure about the technical details and how the implementation really worked. Fast forward to 2015, which is sort of here, is when Bro 2.4 was released, and Bro 2.4 for the first time had broker included, but wasn't enabled by default. So broker was a alternative to the existing cluster functionality. And then around the end of 2018 with Bro 2.6, broker was enabled by default. So broker default. That I think it's fair to say that over the years after broker became the default, there were various challenges with it, and starting I guess mid-2023, so somewhere around here, we started exploring alternatives to broker, particularly because essentially all we need is a messaging library, and there are various existing libraries in the broader open source ecosystem. So we explored using one of these and started to focus on ZeroMQ, which is now available as a, let's say, fully fledged cluster backend in Zeek 8.0. And we're actually planning to switch over Zeek's default cluster backend to ZeroMQ with 8.1. So let's just put something here that sort of predicting the future. But that's the plan. And because that is the plan, we would really like to have people test this out. So if you are running a Zeek control-based Zeek cluster as a testing setup or as a pre-production setup, or even your production setup if you're really bleeding edge, you can use those two options to switch Zeek to use ZeroMQ instead of broker. Deploy, and then if you're lucky, CPU load even goes down, because that's what we've been seeing in some experiments. But yeah, we are happy to hear any feedback from you. Try it out. I'm excited.